But my personal favorite, Allison, my maid of honor, said, raising her champagne glass higher, is that if Warren ever needs any tips for tonight, he can just ask his best man. She turned and pointed her glass toward the groomsmen's table and winked. Miles has been there, done that. The room went silent in a way that felt like all the air had been pulled out of it at once. Warren's smile did not fall. It just froze, like someone had paused a video right in the middle of his face. My best friend of 14 years was still standing there with her champagne glass raised in the air, waiting for a laugh that was never going to come. "Come on, guys, it's funny," Allison said, looking around the room. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. Miles stared down at his plate like he wished the floor would open up and swallow him whole. Then Warren slowly turned his head toward me. "Miles," he said quietly. "You dated Miles?" My mouth opened, but nothing came out. "My name is Rebecca." That toast, on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, was the moment I learned exactly how far someone could go for the sake of a joke. But to understand how we ended up frozen in that room, you need to go back 14 years to when Allison and I were just two ninth graders who thought we would be friends forever. I met Allison in ninth grade. We sat next to each other in science class. She made me laugh so hard on the first day that milk almost came out of my nose. "You're going to be my best friend forever," Allison said that day. "I already decided." I laughed. "You can't just decide that." "Watch me," she said. And for a long time, it was true. We went to every school dance together. We cried over the same boy problems. We stayed up late on the phone talking about nothing and everything at the same time. When my parents got divorced in 11th grade, Allison slept over every night for 2 weeks so I would not be alone. "You don't have to be okay tonight," she told me one of those nights, sitting on the floor of my bedroom. "You just have to get through tonight. That's it. That's the whole job." "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'll never have to find out," Allison said. "I'm not going anywhere." In college, we lived 2 hours apart, but we still talked almost every day. When I got my first job after graduation, Allison was the first person I called. When she went through a rough breakup at 22, I drove 3 hours in one night just to sit with her on the bathroom floor. We built 14 years of trust, one small moment at a time. That is what made everything that came later so hard to understand. Years later, it was Allison who introduced me to Warren. It happened at a birthday party. She grabbed my arm and pulled me across the room. "Rebecca, this is Warren," Allison said. "He works with my cousin. He's funny. You'll like him." I did like him. I liked him a lot. 2 years after that party, Warren asked me to marry him. When I told Allison the news, she hugged me so tight it almost hurt. "I knew it," Allison said. "I basically made this happen." "You did," I laughed. "Thank you." "Obviously, I'm your maid of honor," she said. "Obviously," I said. There was no way for me to know, back then, that the same friend who brought Warren and me together would be the one to almost tear us apart. Wedding planning was busy but fun. Allison helped plan the bachelorette party. She picked out the bridesmaid dresses. She sat with me for hours picking flowers and cake flavors. At the bachelorette party, Allison gave a small toast at dinner. It was sweet and funny and made me cry happy tears. "To Rebecca," Allison said, raising her glass. "The girl who has been my other half since we were 14. I have watched her fall in love with her whole heart, and I could not be happier that it finally landed on the right person." Everyone clapped. I hugged her tight. "I'm so glad you're my maid of honor," I said. "There was never anyone else it could be," Allison said. Moments like that made me trust her completely. That trust is why what happened later felt so impossible to believe. But there was one thing I needed Allison to understand, one thing that could not be a joke. We sat in my living room 3 weeks before the wedding. I had a notebook full of wedding notes. I put the pen down and looked at her. I need to tell you something serious, I said. One thing that could not be a joke. Okay, Allison said. What's wrong? The toast, I said. You can make jokes. I don't care if you tease me about being messy or forgetting my keys, but there is one thing you can never say. What is it? I took a breath. Miles. Allison's smile faded a little. What about him? Warren does not know, I said slowly. He does not know that Miles and I dated when we were 21. He has no idea, and it needs to stay that way. Allison looked confused. Wait, seriously? Warren doesn't know Miles is his best man and you two used to date? No, I said, and it needs to stay that way forever. Promise me. Allison nodded fast. Of course, I promise. I would never say something like that. I even sent her a text message that same night, just to be sure it was written down. I texted her, just to be clear, nothing about Miles in the toast. Nothing at all, please. Allison replied, relax, I would never do that to you, I promise. I read that message 3 times before I felt okay. I trusted Allison. I had trusted her for 14 years. That trust was about to break in front of 200 people. The wedding day was beautiful. The sun was warm. I wore my mother's old pearl earrings. Warren cried a little when he saw me walk down the aisle. At the reception, everyone ate dinner and laughed and danced. Then it was time for the toasts. Allison stood up with a glass in her hand. She had already had 4 drinks. Her face was pink and her voice was loud. Okay, everyone quiet down, Allison said, laughing. I have known Rebecca since we were 14 years old, and let me tell you, this girl has been through a lot of boyfriends to get here. The room laughed. I smiled and squeezed Warren's hand under the table. She once dated a guy who brought his mom on their first date, Allison continued. She dated a guy who thought Ohio was a country. She has seen it all. More laughing. Warren laughed too. This was fine. This was normal wedding toast stuff. Then Allison's smile turned into something else, something looser, something dangerous. But my personal favorite, she said, raising her glass higher, is that if Warren ever needs any tips for tonight, he can just ask his best man. She turned and pointed her glass toward the groomsmen's table. Miles has been there, done that. For 1 second, nobody understood. Then, one by one, I watched the faces around me begin to change. Miles' face went pale. He stared down at his plate. Warren's smile froze. It did not fall right away. It just stopped moving, exactly like it did in the moment I already told you about, the moment I will never forget. My stomach dropped straight to the floor. The room went quiet. Not laughing quiet, not surprised quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the air has been sucked out of the room. Somewhere near the back, a fork dropped onto a plate. The sound felt like a gunshot. Allison laughed, alone, for 1 more second before she realized nobody else was laughing with her. What? She said, looking around. Come on, it's funny. Nobody answered her. Warren slowly turned his head toward me. Miles? He said quietly. You dated Miles? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Warren stood up from the table. He did not yell. He did not throw anything. He just walked outside, alone, into the parking lot, while 200 guests watched him go. The photographer lowered her camera. Nobody wanted a picture of this moment. Behind me, I heard whispers start, low and fast, moving from table to table like a wave. Someone's chair scraped back. A bridesmaid put her hand over her mouth. The band, unsure what to do, quietly started playing again, but nobody danced. The wedding cake sat untouched for almost an hour. Warren came back inside 20 minutes later. He finished the wedding because he did not want to embarrass me more than I already was. But something in his eyes had changed. He smiled for the photos, he cut the cake, but his smile did not reach his eyes anymore, not even once. My mother pulled me aside near the gift table. "Are you all right, honey?" she whispered. "I don't know," I whispered back. "I really don't know." The band kept playing. Guests kept dancing. But I felt like I was watching my own wedding from far away, like it was happening to someone else. That night in our hotel room, Warren sat on the edge of the bed. He did not look at me. "Was I the only one who didn't know?" he asked quietly. "Warren, Did Miles know I didn't know?" he asked. "Did Allison know? Did everyone at that wedding know something about my own wife that I didn't know?" "It was a long time ago," I said. "Before you. It never mattered to me because it was over. I didn't think—" "You didn't think you should tell me your best man used to date you?" Warren said. His voice was not loud, but it was sharp. "You didn't think that was something I deserved to know before 200 people found out at the same time as me?" I had no answer that would fix it. I just cried. "I should have told you," I said through my tears. "I know that now. I told myself it didn't matter because it was so long ago, but I should have let you decide if it mattered, not me." Warren finally looked at me. His eyes were red. "I'm not mad you dated someone before me," he said quietly. "I'm mad that I found out in front of 200 people instead of from you. That's the part one can't get past right now." "I understand," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." We did not sleep much that night. We lay in the dark, not touching, both staring at the ceiling of a hotel room that was supposed to be the start of something happy. The next few weeks were the hardest of our marriage. Warren barely spoke. He slept on the couch some nights. We started therapy just to learn how to talk to each other again. "It's not really about Miles anymore," Warren told the therapist one week. "It's about finding out my whole wedding was a secret I didn't know I was standing in the middle of." I cried through most of that session. I understood. The joke had not just been embarrassing. It had cracked something deep in our marriage that took months to repair. And through all of it, one name kept coming back to my mind: Allison. I did not call Allison after the wedding. I could not even look at her name on my phone without feeling sick. I blocked her number 2 days later. But I still heard things because our friend group was small and everyone talked. My friend Erica called me one afternoon. "I have to tell you something," Erica said. "What is she saying?" I asked. "She's telling people you're overreacting," Erica said. "She said it was just a joke and you're being dramatic because you're embarrassed about your past." I felt my face get hot. She said that? "She also said Warren should have known already," Erica continued. "She said it's not her fault if he can't handle the truth." "Did she say anything about apologizing?" I asked. "Not really," Erica said. "She mostly just seemed annoyed that people were being weird with her about it." "Annoyed?" I repeated flatly. "I'm sorry, Rebecca. I thought you should know what she's saying, instead of hearing it secondhand from someone who makes it worse." I sat down on my kitchen floor. I did not say anything for a long moment. "Rebecca, you still there?" "I'm here," I said quietly. "Thank you for telling me." After I hung up, I did not cry. I did not call Allison to scream at her. I did something much quieter instead. I opened my laptop and started a new folder. I named it Wedding. Over the next few weeks, I collected everything. I saved the text messages where I had asked Allison, in writing, not to mention Miles. I saved messages from guests who described what they saw and heard. I wrote down my own memory of that night while it was still fresh. Then I remembered something else, something I had almost forgotten. 3 weeks before the wedding, late on a Friday night, Allison had called me. I had missed the call and it went to voicemail. I never even listened to the whole thing at the time because I was busy with wedding errands. I only remembered it existed because my phone still had it saved. I sat on my bed one night and finally played it all the way through. Allison's voice came through the speaker, loud and laughing, clearly a few drinks in. Voicemail Allison said, Okay, so I'm working on my toast, and I have this joke about Miles that is so good. Like, if Warren ever needs any tips for tonight, he can just ask his best man. Miles has been there, done that. Warren is going to freak. It's going to be amazing. Okay, bye, love you, see you tomorrow. I sat completely still. This was not a slip of the tongue. This was not an accident from too many drinks at the reception. Allison had written the joke ahead of time. She had planned it. She had known exactly what it would do to Warren, and she had laughed about it before she ever said it out loud. I played the voicemail 3 more times, just to be sure I was not imagining it. I sat there in the quiet of my bedroom, holding my phone, feeling something shift inside me. This was not just a friend who had made a bad choice in the moment. This was a friend who had sat alone days before the wedding and planned exactly how to hurt my husband in front of everyone we knew. I thought about calling Allison and playing it back to her, making her listen to her own voice. But I knew she would just have another excuse ready. She always did. So instead, I saved the voicemail in 3 different places, just in case. Then I called a lawyer. Miss Taylor was a small woman with sharp eyes. She listened to my whole story without interrupting once. Then she listened to the voicemail. When it finished, she sat back in her chair. She planned this, Miss Taylor said. I know, I said. You have the text where you told her not to say it. You have witnesses, and now you have her own voice saying she knew exactly what it would do. Miss Taylor tapped the desk. This is not just an embarrassing joke anymore, Rebecca. This is something a court will want to hear. I don't want her to go to jail or anything, I said. I just want someone to say out loud that what she did was wrong, that it wasn't my fault, that it wasn't Warren's fault. It was hers. We can file for damages 2 ways, Miss Taylor explained. We can ask for the wedding costs that were ruined, the cake nobody touched, the photos nobody wanted taken, or we can ask for something harder to put a number on, the emotional damage this caused you and your marriage. I think we should ask for both and let the judge decide what's fair. Okay, I said, let's do that. Miss Taylor nodded slowly. Then let's go get you that. Over the next few months, she built the case carefully. She gathered the text messages where I had asked Allison not to mention Miles. She gathered statements from guests who remembered the silence in the room after the joke. She filed the voicemail as evidence, timed perfectly so Allison's side would not have time to prepare a clever response. I did not tell anyone what I was doing. I did not post about it online. I did not tell Erica or my other friends. I simply went to work, went to therapy with Warren, and waited for my court date to arrive. Warren noticed the change in me. You seem calmer lately, he said one evening, washing dishes beside me. I feel calmer, I said. I finally feel like I'm doing something instead of just being sad about it. Good, Warren said. You deserve that. The morning of the hearing, I sat at my table with my hands folded in front of me. I did not shake. I did not cry. I had been waiting months for this moment. Across the room, Allison leaned back in her seat. She smiled like this whole thing was a joke, like she already knew she would win. This is stupid, Allison whispered to her lawyer. It was one joke. I heard her. I did not turn around. Miss Taylor leaned close to my ear. Are you ready? She asked. I reached into my bag. I pulled out a small phone. I placed it on the table and slid it toward her. Play it when the time is right, I said quietly. Miss Taylor nodded and slipped the phone into her folder. The judge walked in and everyone stood. My heart beat fast, but my hands stayed still on the table. Allison's lawyer, Miss Jones, stood up first. Your Honor, she said, this is a case about a joke at a wedding made by a young woman who had too much champagne. My client deeply regrets any hurt feelings, but wedding toasts are not legal documents. People say silly things when they are happy and celebrating. The judge nodded slowly. Go on. There is no proof my client meant any harm, Miss Jones continued. She simply made a joke that did not land well. That is not a crime. That is a party mistake. The judge turned to our table. Miss Taylor, your response? Miss Taylor stood up calmly. "Your Honor, my client agrees that jokes happen at weddings," she said. "But this was not an accident. This was planned days in advance, with full knowledge of the harm it would cause. We have proof." The judge raised an eyebrow. "What kind of proof?" "A voicemail, Your Honor," Miss Taylor said, "left by the defendant herself 3 weeks before the wedding." Allison's smile disappeared for the first time all morning. "Your Honor, I object," Miss Jones said quickly. "This is highly irregular. We only received this filing yesterday afternoon and have not had proper time to prepare a response." "It was submitted as evidence yesterday afternoon, correct on time," Miss Taylor said. "I would like the court's permission to play it now." The judge looked at Miss Jones. "You received the filing on time, correct?" Miss Jones flipped through her folder, frustrated. "We did, Your Honor. We simply did not expect it to be relevant." Allison leaned toward her lawyer and whispered something. Miss Jones shook her head slightly, like she did not have a good answer for her. The judge folded his hands. "Play it." Miss Taylor pressed play on the phone. The small speaker filled the silent courtroom. Allison's recorded voice said, "Okay, so I'm working on my toast, and I have this joke about Miles that is so good. Like, if Warren ever needs any tips for tonight, he can just ask his best man. Miles has been there, done that. Warren is going to freak. It's going to be amazing. Okay, bye. Love you. See you tomorrow." The recording ended. Nobody spoke. Allison's face had gone completely white. She stared down at the table. The judge slowly turned toward her. "Did you leave that voicemail?" Allison's voice was small when she answered, "Yes." "And at the time you left it, did you already know the bride had asked you, in writing, not to mention this man in your speech?" Allison did not answer right away. "Allison," the judge said again. "Yes," she whispered. "She asked me not to." "Speak up, please, for the record," the judge said. Allison cleared her throat. "Yes, she asked me not to say anything about Miles." "And why did you say it anyway?" Allison's hands were shaking now. "I don't know. I thought it would be funny. I thought everyone already knew somehow. I didn't think it through." "But your own voicemail proves you wrote this joke ahead of time, word for word," the judge said. "That does not sound like something you failed to think through. That sounds like something you planned." Allison did not answer. She stared down at her hands. "You knew exactly what you were about to do," the judge said. "You even said it yourself, that the groom would react badly. You knew what this would do to him. You knew what it would do to his marriage, and you did it anyway, for a laugh." Allison said nothing. The judge picked up the papers in front of him. He looked at me, then at Allison, then back at his notes. "This is not a case about a joke that landed wrong," the judge said. "A joke that lands wrong is something you did not expect to cause harm. This is different. This was a bomb that the defendant packed on purpose, carried into a room full of people, and set off in front of the one person who was never supposed to hear it." Miss Jones opened her mouth, but the judge held up a hand. "I am not finished," the judge said. "Weddings are not just parties. They are some of the most important days in a person's life. A maid of honor holds a position of trust. That trust was broken here, not by accident, but on purpose." He turned a page. "The plaintiff is not asking for the cost of her cake or her photographer, and frankly, I do not think those costs would be recoverable, even if she had asked. But mental anguish is real. Public humiliation is real. A strained marriage that required months of therapy is real. Those damages did happen, and they happened because of a choice the defendant made." The judge looked directly at Allison. "I am ordering the defendant to pay the plaintiff $3,000 for emotional damages caused by her actions." Allison's face crumpled. She did not argue. She did not say a word. "I also want to say something about friendship," the judge continued, taking off his glasses. "The plaintiff and defendant were friends for 14 years. That kind of friendship is rare, and it is valuable. It is a shame that it ended over a joke that could have easily been left unsaid. I hope both parties take something from this, even if it is simply this. Some private things are not yours to share, no matter how funny you think they might sound. The judge closed his folder. Let this be a lesson to anyone giving a wedding speech in the future. If you would not say it sober, in private, to the person's face, do not say it in a room full of 200 people holding microphones. He tapped his gavel once. Court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, I stood on the steps with Warren beside me. The morning sun felt warm on my face. Warren reached over and took my hand. "You okay?" he asked. "I am now," I said. Behind us, Allison walked out with Miss Jones, head down, not looking at anyone. For a moment, our eyes met across the steps. Allison opened her mouth like she wanted to say something. I waited, but nothing came. She looked away and kept walking. I did not feel like celebrating. A 14-year friendship really was over, and there was no amount of money that would bring it back. But I also did not feel sad anymore. I felt something steadier than that. "Do you regret any of it?" Warren asked. "The lawsuit? All of it?" I thought about it for a moment. "No," I said. "I didn't do this because I wanted her to lose. I did it because I needed someone besides us to say, out loud, that what happened wasn't my fault, that it wasn't your fault either. It was hers." Warren squeezed my hand. It worked. I looked out at the parking lot, at the people walking by, at the ordinary Tuesday morning happening all around us. "I didn't need her to lose," I said quietly. "I just needed the truth to finally be louder than her laugh." We walked down the courthouse steps together, side by side, toward whatever came next.